How's it going, everybody? And welcome to this next episode of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today we have Conrad. Oh, I forgot how to say his name already. I think it's Goeringer. He is the founder of Working Triathlete, author of several books such as The Working Triathlete, and co-author of Triathlon Freestyle Simplified. A guy based out of Nashville, Tennessee, who is in his own right a super avid triathlete, qualified to get his elite license, but never took it. He and Derek Stone are the founders of Working Triathlete, and they currently have over 300 athletes, including, I think, more than 7, possibly 10 professional athletes in the sport. Today, we just have him on hearing his story, so I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Conrad. Awesome. Well, we're rolling. So Conrad, thank you so much for coming on. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, thank you for having me. Glad to chat with you today.
Yeah, for sure, man. I have to be careful because this is like the first interview, I guess technically the second one where I actually know the person of a little bit. So I'll try to keep it as exciting and interesting going forward and asking authentic questions. So I tried to come up with some ones that will hopefully dig in a little bit to who you are. But just to open up first, I want to ask, who is Conrad and how do I pronounce your last name? I should have known that by now.
Oh, that's okay. It's a tricky one. It's Conrad Goeringer, even though it's O-E-R. That's German many times. The letters don't sound like they should when you look at the order of them. But Conrad Goeringer, and I am a triathlon coach based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I started Working Triathlete about 7 years ago now, and so Working Triathlete is it's a triathlon racing team, and it's a coaching group. Right now we have 8 coaches, and we have around 300 athletes in the ecosystem, and they range from pure beginners all the way up to professional triathletes. And so started Working Triathlete, and then about 3 years ago, I actually joined forces with fellow Working Triathlete coach Derek Stone, and he's a great coach. He's based out of Cleveland, and both of us were in Nashville coaching a separate stable of athletes, but we would always kind of meet up, and athletes would train together, and we're like, we should just join forces. And that was a great decision. And we really emphasize community and maximizing performance in triathlon and in life.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a ton about that here in a little bit too, but I just have to say, I see more Working Triathlete kits come up on USAT or other just random media, and I have to ask, is that planned? Are you guys just like getting out there and making sure that you get that exposure, or how in the world is that happening?
We did not plan it. I think it's just a consequence of having the privilege of coaching athletes who are dialed in and have a lot of intrinsic motivation to get better. And we certainly show up to a lot of races, and we do well. I think I don't know the exact numbers, but I think we had 7 or 8 national champions this year. I know that last year we had nearly 40 athletes at the 70.3 World Championships. So it's a good group of athletes. We all inspire one another. And like I said, we're certainly fortunate to have, I guess, attracted or somehow we're able to create a community that is awesome, and that again inspires people to get better.
Yeah, you guys are cool.
We also have cool kits. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say. The cool factor is pretty legit. They're noticeable.
Yes, Derek is actually, he has a good eye for design, and he's pretty good at that. So, and we put a lot of thought into it. It's, oh my gosh, way too much, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm pretty low maintenance when it comes to aesthetics. I like to think I have a good eye, but some people get very, very passionate and concerned about what the kit design is going to look like. So we do care a lot and spend a lot of time, but it helps.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with the black and white design. It's just so clean. It's hard to go wrong, honestly.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I got to ask you, where are you from originally? Like, what is your backstory?
I'm from Pennsylvania originally. So I was born in the Wilkes-Barre, Scranton region. Yeah, Scranton is known as the location of The Office. So I grew up there when I was younger, and then family moved to South Central PA, like Carlisle, sort of near Harrisburg. I grew up in a little town called Mount Holly Springs, and I grew up across the street from a library, and I'm definitely a nerd, and that's, I think, what helps me be an effective coach. But I remember just growing up and being literally obsessed with endurance sports from when I was a kid, from when we did the gym class mile in probably third grade. I still remember my first time. It was like 7:48.
Let's go. That's awesome.
And it has been a passion from, I grew up and in high school and college. I ran cross country and track. And so I've been in the endurance sports game for a while and really absorbing a lot of, I guess, the higher end information out there. The studies. I think I read back in the day, the Tim Noakes, his book was the Bible, and I read that at a very, very young age, and was really a student of running and cycling since I was a little kid. Yeah. And then I went to college here in Nashville. I went to Vanderbilt, and I ran there and stuck around afterwards. So it's been a fun journey. I started coaching a few athletes when I graduated from college, and then started coaching mainly triathletes around 2016, and then sort of officially started working triathlete in 2017.
Okay, nice.
So it's been good.
So growing up, you said like you remember third grade, so you're like 7, 8 years old, figuring out, I can run. Was that something from that point on that you were like, I think I'm going to try to get into this, or was it something that your parents really encouraged? Because I assume you were more of an energetic child, or?
I was always exploring things. We grew up kind of near the Appalachian Trail.
Cool.
And I was really into to fly fishing, but mainly I was interested in baseball, football. I played baseball and football until high school when I specialized. And I was wanted to run fast. I was always one of the faster kids, but I was a pretty big kid. I was actually an inside linebacker and guard when I played football, and then they would always have me run the suicide sprints with the wide receivers because I was like a bigger guy, but I could keep up. So that was kind of funny. And then I just loved running so much that I couldn't not do it. So I stopped playing baseball and football to the chagrin of the coaches, but really loved running. And that sort of led me to coaching. And because I just love everything about it. I love equipping athletes with tools to make them faster, and it's fulfilling. So
yeah, for sure. That's awesome. And you said you ran for college. This was for Vanderbilt, and you were running track and field, or just cross country, or?
So the only varsity sport is cross country, so that's SEC, and then the men's cross country team would also run track meets, but that wasn't like you could not qualify for, say, regionals or nationals. Sure. As part of the track team. But, the cross-country team, we would show up and run.
So with your... Oh, yeah, you were going to say something?
No, I wasn't.
With the first experience of coaching, you said you did right around the end of college, I believe. Was that like someone like, hey, Conrad, I want to get good at this, and you seem to know how? Or was it kind of a premeditated thing? I'm going to get a coaching license and go forward.
It was more informal. It was mainly coaching runners at first, and then I became very, very dialed into triathlon, and the market to coach is just larger in triathlon because it's a way more it's complicated. There are many dynamics. There are many ways to approach training, and I think it's something, I forget the exact statistic, but certainly over 50% of Ironman finishers have a coach. I think it's 60%, and most of the top level athletes do. But so that drove, really specializing in triathlon. And most of the athletes on Working Triathlete obviously are triathletes, but we also work with pure runners, and we coach athletes to, ultras and other things.
Yeah. In college, what was your degree? Was it exercise phys or something like that?
No, it was I double majored in English, poli-sci, and I minored in corporate strategy. So not exercise science. I don't even think that was available.
Yeah.
I know it wasn't. I mean, they don't even have it like a business degree. It had to be economics or corporate strategy. But in college, I wanted to potentially be a lawyer. Took the LSAT and actually was going to go to Vanderbilt for law. But then in August, right before starting, I was like, I don't know if I want to actually be a lawyer. Yeah. So went another direction, and then I worked in the investments group of a publicly traded real estate investment trust for a while in the in acquisitions, and then director of dispositions, and enjoyed that, but sort of coached athletes, one might say, on the side, but really it was, I was spending dozens and dozens of hours a week on building Working Triathlete. Basically, throughout my 20s, just full bore, literally 90-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks, just working, writing, and coaching, and obviously pretty dialed in and learning everything possible that one could learn to make athletes faster.
Yeah, for sure. One last question, then I'll quit going back to the college thing. But what is poli-sci?
Oh, political science.
Oh, okay. Nice. Okay, nice. You feel like that has informed the way that you coach at all and the way that you kind of do life?
I think that writing has certainly helped. So I've always loved writing, and I think writing just teaches you how to think, and it helps you work out different concepts and ideas so that, well, you understand them better, but you just get to the truth better. So I think the main purpose of college is teaching you how to think critically, and how to synthesize a bunch of information and apply it. But number one is, whatever you go to college for, obviously you should become an expert in it, but there's a limit there, and eventually you have to self-study, and you have to have your finger on the pulse of whatever industry you're in. It's like you have all this information. How do you apply it effectively? And I think that's the main benefit of college, and that's certainly helped me coach effectively and parse through a bunch of different concepts and ideas. It's like, okay, this new product came out. Let's think critically. Like, is it actually going to help? Like, why will it help? And all that. Yeah,
for sure. So tell us about, because there's a book that you wrote and then co-wrote. So The Working Triathlete, you wrote that book and then co-authored Triathlon Freestyle Simplified. I guess the first question in this topic, when did you decide, I think I want to write a book? Because you said you enjoy writing, like you've obviously majored in partially English. So tell us that story.
After coaching for a number of years, I thought that it was a productive exercise to write a book. And I thought that a lot of athletes sort of had a misunderstanding of how to train efficiently. And I also wanted to dispel the myth that, one could have a full-time job and actually train in a manner that can enable high performance. So The Working Triathlete is a book that I wrote that it was inspired by a lot of the athletes who I coached. and also how I trained at the time. Because, I was working like a madman. It's amazing. My wife stuck with me through those, 10, 12 years. But it certainly, when we think about triathlon, it is very age group driven. It is composed of a lot of type A high achievers. And because of that, those athletes are usually trying to excel in various areas, but they also want to be fast. So, the working triathlete, it really focused on how to maximize performance with deliberate efficiency. Talked about some various principles therein that can help athletes train efficiently, but also progress, given whatever time they have available to train. And that is the first question that we ask age group athletes when we start coaching them. It's not, it isn't even, what are your goals or what are your time goals, racing goals? It's how many hours a week reasonably do you have to commit to this endeavor? And then you have to adapt the plan to that. And then, you have to look at the athlete. What is their background? Do they have a really high level of fitness in one discipline? How much should they be swimming? And then the plan has to mold to that. So everything hinges on that. And then you just maximize efficiency therein. But, it isn't even efficient training is not even just limited to athletes training 8 to 12 hours a week. It also counts for athletes training 20, 25 hours a week. You want to maximize the fitness benefit relative to the recovery costs. Right. So, the book kind of explores that and explores some principles of efficiency. So that was a fun one to write, and that book was well received. And then Rob Sleemaker and I co-wrote Triathlon Freestyle Simplified, and that was an important book, I think, because triathletes are notorious for not being strong swimmers. Personally, I don't come from a swim background. I think my first 70.3, I swam something like 53 minutes. And, so personally went through, how does a person who has no flexibility in their ankles or shoulders or anything, not even any spinal mobility, how do they improve at swimming? What do they need to focus on? If you're a 40-year-old trying to learn how to swim for the first time, what do you need to think about? What do you need to focus on? If you're a triathlete, how do you structure training? Is it different than, an 8-year-old just learning how to swim? So we tackled that, and we interviewed a bunch of coaches and athletes all across the world, really, who have experience coaching triathlete and triathlon swimmers, and kind of distilled everything. And we try to convey principles and really concepts for how adult learned swimmers or triathlon swimmers should approach swimming.
So tell us what are those kind of key principles for approaching it from a later age?
So, I think that number one is, so it depends on the athlete and where they're starting. I certainly think that at the beginning, shorter, more frequent sessions are important, and you have to be obsessed with technique at the beginning. But you have to get into the water a lot. But I think everybody asks, does technique matter more, or does fitness matter more? And it's both. Like, you can't say one or the other. Certainly focusing on technique at the beginning is essential, and as a consequence of focusing on technique and being dialed in and obsessed with it, your fitness will improve. But I think one thing that really is important for triathlon swimmers is they really need to build swim strength, and they just need to get into the water and swim a lot. And I think that a lot of triathletes, they overthink the swim, and they sort of become over gliders, and they're not focused when they're swimming. Honestly, they're not thinking. They're robotic, and they start thinking about, what is my elbow supposed to do, or how does Katie Ledecky swim? Right. and they're not feeling the water and just thinking about what they're actually physically doing. They're thinking about like the ideal swim stroke rather than developing their own stroke. But yeah, I think some principles for open water triathlon swimming is the catch in the pool is most important. Oftentimes, very few triathletes, honestly, or adult learned swimmers can develop a really good, strong kick. So when we think about wetsuit swimming, I mean, we just think about, if one can achieve a high stroke rate, that's probably a good thing. To have a high stroke rate, you need to be fit and get your timing down. We really focus on how the kick drives rotation. So we really focus on coupling the pool with sort of core rotation, and core rotation occurs subsequently from obviously kicking down. So, we kind of break down the stroke like that. But, those are some principles for, I think, that adult learned swimmers should think about. We also focus on some of the big errors, crossing over center when your hand enters. That's probably the number one error we see. So, so we have strategies for fixing that,
Sure.
But
what is a good stroke rate in your experience? Like 65, 75?
It really depends on the stroke style, I think.
Sure.
I mean, 35 stroke cycles or 70, strokes, like your hand hits the water 70 times. That can work for, and you can have a front pack swim if you have a good hip driven stroke and a strong kick. If you have more of a shoulder driven one, you're probably going to need to be above 40 or 80. I mean, obviously you look at Lucy Charles and she's up, in the mid 90s, I believe.
Bam. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have somebody like Florian Angert. He's a pro triathlete. I read somewhere that, his is lower. It's like low to mid 30s, but he must have a strong kick. Taller athletes are going to have they can have a lower stroke rate, but that isn't even necessarily always the case. There are some really strong, distance swimmers, like pure swimmers, 1,500 meter swimmers and they're like maybe 6'6", and their stroke rate is like 45, so that's 90. So it can vary, but if an age group triathlete is below, say, 30 to 32 stroke cycles per minute, we definitely want to increase it, because they're probably overgliding up front, or they're swimming with too much of a catch-up style stroke. So we typically want to fix that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, swimming's super interesting to me. I love swimming, and I say that now, only years later after swimming significantly throughout the week, trying to get in 5 or 6 days a week in the pool. And I've kind of thought of it, and I've never really been coached specifically in swimming or had someone analyze it, which is probably a bad thing. Probably build on that more had I done that. But I feel like swimming is almost like a painting, where you take in a ton of information, and if the painting is your stroke or what you're doing in one cycle, you kind of add on things over time. At least I have. Like, you focus on one part, you get it, you feel it, you understand it. From the catch to the pull. Like, one of the biggest jumps I ever made in swimming was after my coach just told me something simple, like, hey, just to make sure, after the catch and the pull, that you're pushing past your hip and almost grazing that thumb on the hip. And that gave me another, probably 20-30% to be able to pull through, kick out the water in the back, and then just complete that full stroke. And then this past 7-8 months, figuring out how to time your kick in line with your stroke, where it's like you're catching and starting to kick when you're getting kind of at midpoint, and then they work off of each other, like two oars in a canoe working together. So yeah, swimming's super interesting to me. I've done crazy things like get in the pool for 500 to 1,000 yards in my wetsuit with really long leg hair, and then after you jump in afterwards, you have like this ultra sensitivity, and you feel like, oh yeah, I got more drag coming off this part, or I'm kicking way outside of my box or whatever. I'm just whale flailing in the back. So yeah, swimming's super awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely a puzzle. It's tough to, if you're a new swimmer, to figure it out for sure. But Number one is building comfort in the water, learning how to float, and then learning how to breathe. And then it's just all about refining after that and spending time in the water. There are no shortcuts.
Yeah. Yeah, literally not. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned breathing, because I remember when I first started swimming, I almost was like in this semi-controlled state of panic for years, because you're like, I have to breathe, I have to breathe. And then you get comfortable enough to where you're just breathing right above the water surface and stuff. It's amazing, too, to watch like Olympic level swimmers to be able to basically not breathe for a 100 and just go full force, and to realize they have that much power and just the ability to suck up that much oxygen beforehand to not even need to breathe and just glide. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. And that's one reason I always encourage triathletes to learn how to flip turn, because you just learn breath control. I mean, you learn how to hold it, but your body, or really your brain, I think just gets more comfortable managing the CO2 buildup that occurs. And I think you just get more efficient at, expelling the CO2. And a lot of it has to do with achieving a calm mind. And then in an open water situation, then if you miss a few breaths, it's not a big deal, because you're used to actually doing flip turns. So, I think that's probably the number one reason triathletes should learn flip turns, honestly. I think it makes you a better open water swimmer because of that. Not to mention, you gotta tap into a swimmer's mindset, and you want to view yourself as a swimmer. We think about identity in sports and triathlon, and too many athletes think, oh, I'm not a swimmer, or oh, I'm not a runner. And it's like, how many years are you going to swim, 3 or 4 times a week before you think of yourself as a swimmer? And I think part of achieving that identity is doing what swimmers do. And part of that is learning how to flip turn. And, it's good to learn other strokes and things like that, whether or not it actually makes you a better long distance open water swimmer, because that's what triathletes really are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned with the flip turns helping. I've never even thought about that, but the ability to be able to skip a breath or two, because a recent race I did got kicked in the face around a buoy, and it's like, oh, I guess I'm not breathing for the next 2-3 strokes. You're just trying to gather your senses. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So you said that, for a stint of 10 to 12 years, like you were training like a madman. What did that look like? And what inspired it? Were you like, okay, I'm going to go at this full time? Did you want to qualify? I'm assuming you did qualify to get your elite card. Did you decide just to focus on other things? Like, what was that phase of your life like?
Yes. So, I mean, I trained a decent amount, but pretty darn efficiently. So I wanted to build certainly the coaching business and have that sustain me. And that was a goal of mine for years, really. Obviously that takes time and you have to prove yourself, but, I did train and compete at, decently high age group level. I qualified.
Being humble, it was very high.
Qualified for the elite license, but I did not take it, just because I, again, had other goals, and that included getting Working Triathlete to a place where, I didn't have to have another job, like a corporate job. And my wife and we have a daughter, and obviously wanted to support her. And that was more important than trying to train, 25 hours a week to sort of be a viable pro, which is necessary, especially, with a lack of swim background. I started to really try to learn how to swim in, my early 20s. It's tough, and broke my collarbone, and I have no flexibility in my left shoulder. So there are certain limitations that I wasn't willing to put in the work required to do it. I mean, that's the straight, and it makes sense, because now, sort of mid-30s and in a good position, and finally reaping, the fruits of having the ability to help other athletes, and really that's my highest and best use. It's as a coach, and it's helping other athletes just achieve their goals, achieve their dreams in triathlon, but also, just build their own character. Because that's one thing that triathlon sort of forces. It's like to be consistent with training, it requires you to sort of embody certain virtues like self-discipline and a sense of self-agency. And these virtues, they leach over and they cross over to other areas of your life. They bolster confidence, and you just become a more, I think, effective person.
Sure.
Of course, we also have to strike that balance and make sure that triathlon doesn't take over our lives if we're not trying to become professionals. And certainly my job, if I'm coaching, an attorney or a doctor or just anybody in business, and they want to say, qualify for Kona, it's setting expectations and then building a plan that will enable them to not sacrifice other areas of their life, or at least picking, what months do we need to be really dialed in, and your family has to kind of get on board with that. And then after that, we got to peel back the load a lot, not just because, after an Ironman you need to recover, but you also have to kind of nurture the other areas of your life. And that's important. And we don't want to forget that. But, I also work with very, very fast athletes, pros, and they're at a stage in their life where they're committed. And I think to reach the level they're at, you got to be a little obsessed with that, and you have to be a little selfish, and but you still need to have, I think, an identity separate from, triathlon also. But so it's part of my job is, I think, helping athletes think that through, like think about their why and think about how am I going to integrate triathlon into my life so that it doesn't steal from my actual enjoyment of life overall.
Have you coached any age group or professional? I assume this would probably fit the question fit around professionals a little bit more, but have you coached a professional through kind of their debut to coming toward the end of their season, or where they decided to retire?
Not a pro to retirement yet. I mean, I've certainly worked with triathletes who have taken some time away from the sport, and very few athletes I work with honestly fall off. I've worked with many athletes for 6, 7+ years, but there are a few of those athletes who have been around a long time. Sometimes they step away and they've actually come back. So, because part of it is when you're a triathlete, it's almost like a state of mind. It's like you just love moving your body, you love it, and
it's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle, but I think there comes a point where you want to reframe it. And if you're overly obsessed with performance, and sometimes that can be too stressful and it can wear on you and you get burnt out. So sometimes you need time completely away from the sport, which is good, or you need a few months of just unstructured training, doing your own thing. And honestly, I think we're kind of seeing that with a lot of the pros who are, in their like early 40s now, who are exploring other endurance endeavors like gravel racing. I'm thinking about Sebastian Kienle, Heather Jackson she's into gravel racing, and so there's a lot. There's a lot of endurance sports that don't involve combining swim, bike, running, and it can be refreshing doing that. And I would say that the most fun I've had during races were races where I didn't really care about performance. It was just embracing the journey. So I did Norseman in I forget when, 2017 or 18, and that's probably the most famous extreme triathlon in the world. Happens in Norway. There's I think like 18,000 feet of total elevation gain, and conditions. Yeah, conditions are brutal, but I just did not care about going fast there, and I just cherished every minute of that, and it was a blast, truly.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need a year of just that, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. The reason I asked that is because, I mean, in my own life, I've experienced it some, but I've heard lots of stories or witnessed other experiences where professionals will, and this is for any sport, Olympian or professional driver or whatever, they'll come to a place where their career is more or less kind of ending or transitioning, and then the identity is so wrapped in what that they've been doing for so long, it's like really hard for someone to disassociate themselves and realize like, well, this was a part of who I am and it built who I am, but I can take a lot of these foundational motivators, going back to what you were saying about the why am I doing what I'm doing, and move that to something else. And I feel like that needs to be continued to be talked about more, because while performance is amazing and it impresses us all and we all love going fast, it's just a great feeling. Like you were saying, being able to embrace the journey enough to take those foundational blocks and move towards something else it's actually really difficult to do. I experienced it through business and starting things and then in them failing or having to move on and forced into a new circle of identity. But I think it's really important. So that's why I asked that question, because eventually, hopefully that'll come where you've got some athletes that are kind of retiring, moving to the next phase. I think of Jan Frodeno, obviously. He's not going to have a hard time. He'll still be able to be involved, I think, for a long time in the sport. But a lot of people who aren't at the top 10, top 50 of the world, you kind of fall by the wayside. Like, what can we do to help them survive, not only survive, but thrive in the next phase?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. There's an old joke that is like a professional triathlete retires and they're either going to be a coach or a real estate agent. And that's pretty common. And that's great. I mean, it makes sense. Those are certainly two good professions, but it is an interesting question. It's like, yeah, identity, value. I think at the end of the day, you need to just, relationships are number one, and just personal relationships, just because humans need that community, and that's the most valuable thing. But also just relationships from a networking perspective. I mean, people can, it is a unique situation though, if especially you think about like the ITU athletes, guys who all they did was triathlon, and then they're 40 and it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
But I do think it's a relief for a lot of them, because like I was just saying, the pressure is high, the burnout is real. Frankly, it's even as a coach, like it is substantially more stressful coaching very, very high level athletes than it is age group athletes, just because of the emotions involved with it.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of, I think, a high EQ. You need some emotional intelligence to deal with it, and I think egos are bad and things like that. So it is certainly a challenge. I think when an athlete, like a pro triathlete, retires, it's like, what's next? But
Yeah.
The skills, kind of going back to this concept of the virtues that you kind of hone or manifest if you train at a high level in triathlon, those skills, or that the discipline you kind of forge and all that, it makes you successful at whatever you do. Right. So, I think if one wants to start their own thing in triathlon or elsewhere, I think retired triathletes are probably in a good position to do so. But yeah, it is a unique thing.
Yeah. Have you ever run into a situation where one of your athletes, professional age group, is just like doubting you, and it's the right way to go? Has that ever affected your confidence in what you're doing or in the methods that you use?
Yes. Now, I'm pretty good at appealing to science and kind of asking questions of the athlete. And, if they think one thing, I'm like, why do you think that? And then what about this? Remember this. But with certain it depends on the athlete. Like with certain athletes, it's more of certain athletes, like they just want the gym teacher style coaching relationship where, I recommend this, and then they just do it without questioning it. Other athletes, they like having more of a say in their coaching relationship, and it's more athlete driven.
Yeah.
And it's a coach's job to understand and adapt to the athlete and get them what they need. Because at the end of the day, even if like you think one approach is probably better, if an athlete thinks that another one is better for them, when they toe the line, they might be more confident. And you can't discount, the value of being in a positive mental state, towing that line, knowing that you did everything you could to be ready to, face your competitors and push your limits and get the most out of yourself. But I mean, certainly there are non-negotiables, but if athletes, they want to race a lot, even though that can impact their ability to maximize performance at an A race. If something like that, I'm like, you're going to have a better Ironman performance if you don't do these 4 other races in the build. At the end of the day, it's also, that's my perspective, but
Sure.
We also do triathlon just to have fun. And, athletes, if they want to race, they want to race. But it's my job to, I think, offer different pathways to approach that we can use. And, but in certain instances, I try to coach in an athlete-driven way with kind of the athletes I'm talking about who are, and then stubborn. The other thing is though, like certain athletes are just not coachable. And sometimes if we're onboarding an athlete, if they are too stubborn, it just doesn't make sense to coach them. So, I've certainly turned away athletes who I thought wouldn't be, a good fit for my coaching style. Because that's the other thing. It's like every athlete is not going to be a perfect fit for a coach. So the athlete-coach relationship is an interesting one. Yeah, you're sort of a therapist. You're a scientist. You're a friend. You're an advisor. You're everything. But that's what makes it fun. But it's serious business, and I certainly take it seriously.
So I'm curious, because you have raced quite a bit, and there's this feeling that we all get once you cross the finish line, especially if it's like a good race. No matter what, if you finish it, that's one feeling. But then hitting kind of benchmarks you set for yourself, or even some minor expectations or whatnot, it's a great feeling. When you have an athlete that is able to perform and hit those benchmarks, let's just use Miguel as an example because I know you coach him and he's a professional. Do you get the same kind of a high? I'm assuming it's not exactly the same, but you obviously love coaching and you've sought this out. What is that feeling like in comparison?
Yeah, I mean, I get way more stressful before an athlete's important race than I do my own, because my highest and best use is as a coach, and I still race, but not. Yeah, I'm like second. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would say that, I do get probably more excited and happy when, an athlete achieves a big goal. I mean, this past weekend, it's just fresh on my mind, but, 2 athletes did Ironman Maryland, and one athlete I've been working with for a couple of years, Dallin. So, his PR, I think he did 2 12.5-hour Ironmans before I started to work with him. And then started working with him a year later. He went 10.5 hours at Florida. And then another year later, which was Ironman Maryland, he just got 3rd in his age group. He went like 8:30 something, but the swim was shorter. So it's probably the equivalent of, I don't know, low 9 hours. And that kind of trajectory and improvement is incredible. And I also coached another athlete who Dallin trains with a lot, Nick, and started coaching him a few months ago. And in that time period, it was just really fun working with him because he improved a lot. And he got top 10 in his age group, went the equivalent of a mid-9 hour Ironman. So that's exciting. Todd, he's a pro who I work with this year. He took his pro card and he just put together a great race at 70.3 Michigan. He went 3:49, and that was a massive PR. He executed well, and that that was just a couple of days ago, he did that, and I was extremely excited for
Just
that.
Elated, yeah.
Literally more excited probably than any other performance that I've personally done. And so it's kind of funny, I guess, when you think about it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. I wasn't expecting that. And maybe that means that I'm just not a very good coach.
Well, no, I mean, it's also like a season of life, I think. I have
Sure.
obviously a wife and a daughter. We had a daughter this year, actually, and your priorities kind of change. And over the last few, especially if you jump full time and you're a coach and I'm training 8 to 12 hours a week now personally, but I'm coaching 60 hours a week, and you never turn off. It's like athletes that text at 8 p.m. I'm trying to set boundaries, but if they text or something, I have to answer and respond, and you invest a lot of time in it, and you sort of track them, and you obviously care about them, and it's fun to watch them excel. And on the flip side, it sucks if they don't have a race that they're happy with, and that happens. But usually those are opportunities to explore what went wrong. Like, did the taper go poorly? You travel to Europe, what you didn't adapt to the time zone well, because at the end of the day, I mean, we integrate a lot of science, and we know exactly where our athletes' fitness stands. So if something goes wrong on race day, we know why. Like, I can't think of an example as like, well, I don't know what happened. It's like, if an athlete has a poor performance, maybe 2 days later, it's like, oh, they have COVID, or they have a poor performance. We just look at the bike. It's like, well, you overcooked the first half of the bike. Don't do that. So otherwise, you can't fake fitness. So they're going to race to their fitness, no more, no less. So that's something to remember. I think that's in general in triathlon, it's just becoming more science focused. This idea that, the psychobiological model is a thing. It's like you can will your way to a good performance. Think about the central governor or something, but you're not going to exceed like your body's actual fitness, like metabolic abilities. And we know what the metabolic abilities are now. So there really isn't, there are very, very few surprises nowadays.
I'm going to be selfish now and take some time to talk about my issue and see if you can help me solve it on the air.
Sounds good.
No, so I asked that a little bit tongue in cheek and want to talk about it because, I feel like I haven't had many other people who have had some type of an issue. In fact, I can't find a single example of somebody who just keeps coming back after most races and it's like, I can't figure this out, where I get like this cramping issue in the stomach, and I'm like, maybe it's my position, maybe it's I'm overeating on the bike, maybe it's I'm over biking, but I haven't ever walked away and been like, yeah. I mean, there was one exception, Blue Ridge this past year, where I felt like I executed pretty well, but even then, the bike, there was some cramping, or on the run there was some cramping, and it ultimately kind of forced me not to eat, and then I start going downhill. So from that standpoint, I understand it. But do you know of any other athletes who have had issue where they're racing, like you've got everything kind of marked out of what they should be hitting power numbers, and then come the end of the bike and getting onto the run, it just kind of falls apart due to some kind of like gastrointestinal cramping?
Yes, the nutrition piece it can be complicated, and there are many different ways to look at it. I mean, we partnered with Precision Hydration, actually, and we're doing sweat testing here at our lab in Nashville and trying to figure out exactly, how much sodium is an athlete losing per liter of fluid, because that might govern the osmolality of the sports drink that you're drinking, or maybe drinking a sports drink as in having the carbs and sodium distributed evenly in the liquid. Maybe that isn't the best approach for an athlete. Maybe they want to separate fluid consumption from carb consumption, things like that. But it definitely is a puzzle. I think there are some principles that are kind of universally applicable. And, obviously you want, so there is a limit on what the body and the stomach can absorb, and that's going to vary person to person. I think it's important to know how much you need to take in, and you can understand how many grams of carbohydrates you should be taking in an hour by doing different types of testing. We use inside testing a lot, and that'll tell you what, at 200 watts, how many grams of carbs are you burning versus fat. And if you know that, you might find, oh, I don't need to take in 120 grams of carbs. I don't even need to take in 90, which is what's commonly thought of as carb max. Most people should be able to take in 90 grams of carbs. But, if you're doing a race and if your oxidative sort of metabolism is strong, you might not need to take in that many carbs, and you can reduce basically the osmolality of the fluid you're taking in. So less carbs, less sodium, just fewer electrolytes in the solution, and you could be good. But I mean, at the end of the day, most athletes, I like thinking about it in terms of most athletes should be able to take in 90 grams of carbs per hour. Look at it depends how concentrated you want the sports drink, but isotonic is 6 to 8% really. So if we're thinking about a liter of fluid, that's what, if we do the math, 1,000 milliliters in a liter, 8% of that would be 80 grams of carbs. So 80 grams of carbs per liter. So that's 80 times 4 is 320 calories per liter of fluid. If it's a 750 ml bottle, divide that, multiply that by 0.75, then so the point is, be careful with how concentrated the sports drink solution is. If you're having gut bombs, look at reducing, the concentration of carbs and sodium in the fluid, and then contemplate taking in, supplementing with gels or blocks or something. But you kind of have to test it. You just have to test it and figure out an approach that works for you. I mean, again, most athletes, testing kind of starts around 70 to 80 in training in the race specific phase. And then we see, how does 90 work? Is it even necessary to take 90? Many of the smaller athletes we work with, I think about athletes who maybe are only putting out, they're doing an Ironman and they're putting out 110 watts, 120 watts. They don't need to be slamming 120 grams of carbs. So it's going to vary for sure, athlete to athlete. But there are outliers also. So the athlete I just talked about who got third in his age group at Maryland, he took in 140 to 160 grams of carbs per hour. That's absurd.
That's crazy.
It's, in training, I was like, the thing is, it just worked for him really well, and he was fine. And it enabled him to run the marathon well. His stomach was perfectly fine. I would say if 98 to 99% of triathletes tried to emulate that, they would be throwing up. They would have gut bombs, etc. So, I mean, I think looking at sodium concentration and carbohydrate concentration in the fluid you're taking in would be step one, and tweaking that.
Yeah.
What are you taking in? What did you take in that caused the gut bomb?
Oh man, I don't even want to. So Wisconsin was just a complete crapshoot for a lot of reasons. I mean, to be honest, I thought I had quote unquote dialed in nutrition, but because of my prior experiences, I was like, well, I'm just kind of do it by feel, and I had some ballpark numbers, but basically what I ended up doing was getting out on the bike and underhydrating, undersalting, and then trying to overhydrate, and couldn't get anything in. And I mean, after I was done, I literally had to have 2 full IV bags, and I took them like it was nothing. I probably could have done 3. So I was just severely dehydrated in a place I'd never been before. So there's a lot. I got a sweat test done. I haven't done the other test you were talking about, the carb test. What is that one called again?
I mean, you can use a metabolic cart. I mean, there are different lab testing protocols available. And, here in Nashville. So our Working Triathlete headquarters, we're actually headquartered in a facility and partnered with Transformation Lab, and we do a bunch of different types, any performance or metabolic test you can think of, or body comp. But what I mentioned earlier was inside testing, and inside involves getting your aerobic threshold, obviously, or your anaerobic threshold, your VO2 max, and your VLA max. And the VLA max piece is important because that's a measurement of glycolytic power, or, what really that will influence when your body kind of turns from the oxidative metabolism or burning fat to carbs. Whenever it's burning carbs, it's generating lactate. And, so we measure all that. And based on VLA max and how those three metrics kind of relate to one another and where they fall, we know how much lactate you're producing. And lactate is basically half a sugar molecule, and it represents what's going on in your glycolytic system. And that way you can know exactly at a given power how many grams of carbs you're burning and how many grams of fat. And that's useful. And then you could just do the math. If you know you're burning, say, 80 grams of carbs per hour during your Ironman at whatever 200 watts, then you probably don't need to be taking in 120. You should not be taking in 120.
Sure.
So it can be helpful. They can also measure that just with the metabolic cart. So like the mask that you put on, and it measures like gas exchange. That should be able to calculate all of that too, depending on the lab doing it. They can give you that data because it measures that. It knows. So that is useful.
For sure. Your replenishment rate for carbs versus like what you're actually burning through, what they're getting with the gas or however you measure it, should that be around 100% you find, or like 75%, or what do you usually do?
So it depends on the race distance, because
intensity.
You start with, just call it, most people might start with, say, 400 grams of carbohydrates stored as glycogen in their body, and then you think they're going to swim. Like, what did their breakfast look like? And then there's the swim. How much did they deplete during the swim? So just say they start the 70.3 with 300 grams of carbs. It's like, well, at the end of the 70.3, you need some glycogen left, and it kind of depends. You certainly want a positive number there. If so you say you're burning 100 grams of carbs per hour, and you're taking in 50, well, you're negative 50, and then if it's taking you 5 hours to do it, you're burning 250 grams of carbs. You're net negative that much. So you want to do the math, but the thing is, as your glycogen stores are depleted, it is the case that your ability to kind of put out power might be compromised for whatever reason. Maybe your body kind of downregulates, your central governor kicks in, and there's central fatigue, and lack of glycogen is contributing to that. So it isn't like you have this big, when the indicator is on E, you can't function, because there is a performance decay, beyond a certain amount of glycogen depletion. But I would say if you can finish with like 20 to 25% of your glycogen stores intact, that's a good thing. For most athletes could pull that off. But the athletes who are going really hard in long Ironman races, I mean, they're going to be zero, close to zero. They don't have a choice.
By the time you finish,
they're putting out 315 watts for 4 to 5 hours, and then running 6-minute miles. It's like, no matter how you slice it, they're going to be combusting a lot of carbs, and they're going to be close to zero. Whereas somebody who's burning fewer carbs, or somebody who can take in a lot of carbs, it's just there are different ways to look at it. But it's nice knowing where carb max is, and that's where you're burning 90 grams of carbs per hour, because most people can replace close to that. And that's going to be pretty close to Ironman pace for most athletes.
Yeah, for sure. Super fascinating. Thanks for letting me be selfish there. I'm actually starting to mix my own stuff. I did the research with a buddy and ordered the glucose and the fructose, doing the 2-to-1, and then some electrolyte mix. So I can. The big focus has actually been sodium because I realized that I'm getting rid of like 1,700 to 2,000 milligrams of salt an hour. And
Wow,
I was
that's
only,
high.
yeah, I got my sweat testing done, and I was, yeah, just, I guess, way more saltier than I thought I was. And I was only taking probably at the best like 600 milligrams an hour. So I'm going to strategically throw that number up
Yeah,
quite a bit. But
you're using what are you using? Sodium citrate.
so I'm getting this stuff called from Redmond Light, and it's got a mixture of like actual sodium, chloride, potassium, magnesium, some other different stuff in there. I'm not even totally sure, but the big things I'm focusing on, because the sweat test gave me back like chloride, potassium, and sodium, but I'm not sure how to measure out the potassium in millimole per liter yet. I got to figure that stuff out. But hopefully, you know what they say about race day, try everything new. So Augusta, I'm trying it like this week and then for the race, and kind of just using it as a fun test to see if I would love to just finish running 6:30s to 6:40s and not feeling like my stomach, I'm going to have to stop because I'm cramping so hard. And I think that the salt really does have a piece to play, but I'm not 100% sure of
Yeah,
it.
I mean, be careful with the amount of sodium and magnesium. You don't really need any magnesium. You're smart athletes who study nutrition, who know way more than I do about electrolytes. They many of them do say that you don't need, or at most need, negligible amounts of potassium and magnesium. The main thing is sodium, because your body loses a lot of sodium when it's sweating, not as much potassium and magnesium. And the issue is, you have a sports drink that has a lot of magnesium and potassium, it's just increasing the osmolality of it. So, and that can cause stomach distress. So, consider that. Check out some sources. Obviously, Alex Harrison is a good resource. Check him out. But like you're doing, it's testing. Testing is important. We're kind of seeing that it used to be that fructose was seen as the less important sort of sugar molecule type, but a lot of studies are showing 1-to-1 might be better for many athletes. One to one fructose glucose. Again, I think most sports drinks are probably 2-to-1, but check out the science. What works with certain athletes might not work with others. I think Cody Beals,
he did a whole thing.
He likes way more fructose than glucose. And somebody like Alex Harrison, I think he's advocating 1-to-1 now, but we'll see. And then one, was it Scratched? No, Infinite. They came out with this like recently, this super fructose solution.
Fructose takes longer to break down and to take up, right? Like in the body.
I mean, it was thought, but it may not take as long as we once thought. So there, again, you have these trends in triathlon and even in nutrition. Low carb, then high carb, then fructose is good, fructose is bad, and then on the bike even like
and
low
it's
hands,
super
high
confusing
hands.
as an age group athlete. Let me tell you.
Yeah, well, the thing is, there's like no consensus in a lot of these things, because I mean, controlled studies are great, but almost every controlled study has flaws. So, but I think 2-to-1 is a good approach. But I'm saying if that doesn't work, maybe 1-to-1 is good. Maybe you have more transporter, proteins in your gut to transport the fructose, the glucose. Probably not. 2-to-1 is probably the best, but.
Well, I'm going to play with it all, I mean, especially after this race, because I want to get something figured out by December of next year for New Zealand. If I could figure this out, I feel like I could kind of reach the goal of qualify for the professional license and be like, yes, I did it. And then who knows? Maybe have some kids. You never know, but see how it goes. So a couple more questions and then we'll probably start wrapping it up here. What's it like being a dad?
It is amazing. It's really fun. The toothless grin of my daughter just cracks me up. In the morning, she's so happy. Well, she's happy most of the time if she's not hungry or anything. But it's life-changing for sure. It definitely impacts sleep. And it is good personally, I think, as a coach to understand what it means to have kids, obviously, because many of the athletes we coach have kids. Athletes this week, I keep bringing up Ironman Maryland just because the two athletes who I coach who did well, but both of them had kids this year. So, we had to be efficient with training. We had to be strategic with placing key endurance sessions on the weekends because, they want to be there for their kids. So we did the long run during the week as opposed to stacking key endurance sessions Saturday, Sunday, so that they could have Sunday with their families. So I think it is amazing. It's a lot of work, much less sleep, and it also helps with. Oops, sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
I thought
I'll clip this part up and then put it on social media because it'll be funny.
Good. It was planned though. It was planned.
Right.
I thought I turned it off. I actually turned it on from silent mode when I clicked it. But
no worries.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun for sure. I recommend it if one wants to actually have a kid. Now it is a lot of work, so if you're not sure if you want one or not, you should certainly make sure you do. But it's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. No, my wife and I just turned 31 and my wife's finishing up nurse practitioner school, and a lot of our friends, we've kind of moved from the phase of post-college to everyone's getting married to now everyone's starting to have kids. And I do have a little bit of the baby fever. I do really look forward to it. One day, we'll see what all happens. We still kind of want to go out west and, kind of have a little bit of an adventure, but we'll see how it goes.
It's funny because you hear from, a bunch of different media outlets that millennials are just not having kids and like, oh my goodness, what is going to happen to the population? And I think to an extent it actually is, but it's funny. I just think that everybody's pushing it back just because everybody's probably, many people are going to college, and then there's been this huge emphasis on career, especially you're achieving a certain level there. And then, so I think, but when, we had our baby in April, and I think like 5 out of the 6 bridesmaids who were in our wedding, my wife's bridesmaids, they were pregnant at the same time, and within 2 months, like 5 of them had kids. Everywhere. Yeah, so I think it's all happening now. So hopefully, when we think about population, at least keeping it steady, if only for the continued economic growth of hopefully our 401ks will be worth something. And you think about Social Security, we need to have some babies.
Yeah. Oh, Social Security. I really don't think it'll be there, but hey, who knows? Money is such a. I was just reading an article that was showing a trend line of the U.S. debt, and it's like from here to here, and then we just added I think it was 1 to 3 trillion, and under, I forget the time, but it was a short amount of time, less than a few months. I was like, that is ridiculous. Who knows what the world's going to come to?
I know. It's concerning, but we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully triathlon continues to grow.
Yeah, for sure. There's plans for it. I think it is growing. It's going through an interesting phase right now. So I got to talk with the CEO of USAT, and I know a couple other people that are in the world enough to Super League and whatnot, just hearing about all the different things they're trying. I think we're in a phase now where it's catching on enough esteem and interest that people are willing to take more financial risks. But I think a lot of things are going to have to continue to fail until we find these real core avenues that work. Because you got Ironman, PTO, and PTO with was it USAT where they just announced that the tour races are going to be recognized as the World Championship or something like that.
Yeah, World Triathlon PTO partnered.
Yeah, that's right.
And the long course World Championships for World Triathlon is going to be a PTO event, basically.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
Yeah, it is for sure. It'll see how it all pans out in the next couple of years, but it's an exciting time to be a part of the sport, and yeah, I love it. So cool.
It is. It's good
Cool.
stuff.
Well, cool, man. Well, thank you so much for jumping on. It's been super fun to kind of hear a bit of your story and a lot of your experience. We'll make sure to link the different books and the Working Triathlete website at the end. Are you taking on more athletes if somebody's looking for Conrad or to be a part of Working Triathlete? How do you guys do that?
We have a number of coaches, and we're actually bringing on a couple more. But I personally am at capacity, but we have a number of very, very good coaches who are taking on athletes. And if anybody wants to be coached or is interested in learning more about Working Triathlete, definitely go to workingtriathlete.com. Have a few different tiers depending on what type of support you want. We even have like just a club membership that a number of athletes are a part of. And in Nashville, we have a lot of group sessions, and I mean, literally 1, 2, 3, 4 times a week we meet and have group sessions. We also have, I should mention, kind of an elite development team that we have, and it's we started it last year because we had 10 athletes or more who were on that age group pro bubble, and we wanted to support them and taking the pro card and have them sort of band together as one, like unit. And we also wanted to leverage that to get them huge discounts or sponsorships or things like that. And even more importantly, get them training together. So in Nashville, we have a number of high level athletes training together, and I know two of them are going to be doing Augusta, the race you're doing. And the goal is to get more athletes training together in Nashville. Yeah. And because that group training dynamic is important, and it's how you elevate your fitness. I mean, you can train on your own, and that's definitely an approach. A lot of successful athletes do it, but it's also good to have a team around you of other athletes and fitness professionals who can help you get better. So that's one thing that we're excited about. And the other thing is, here in Nashville, we just moved our headquarters to a facility, and we are doing a lot of really productive testing, like metabolic testing, tracking body comp. We have a DEXA machine here, and that's the most accurate way to measure body comp. And again, we're doing metabolic testing, VO2 max testing, anaerobic threshold, all that. So it's good stuff. So definitely feel free to reach out to me or just submit a form on the website if you want to get in touch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll make sure to link it all. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, Conrad, thank you so much, man. It's been super fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Seth. Good chatting with you.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Stupid Questions with Conrad. Thank you again to Conrad for coming on and just sharing a bunch of your experience and wisdom and stuff you've learned over the years, and letting me be a little bit selfish about my own personal dealings with triathlon and nutrition. I hope you guys found good value in it. If you've made it to this point in the episode, I would just ask that you would please go give a review of this podcast wherever you're listening, and even subscribe to our YouTube channel, Stupid Questions, or my own personal YouTube channel, My Crazy Moonshot. Thank you guys so much, and really appreciate you guys taking a listen, and we will talk to you on the next one. Peace out.